All right, everybody. Here we are for episode 74 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. This week, we are going to talk prison movies. There's so many to choose from. There's ones that, completely take place inside of a prison, and then there's ones that are only a little portion of a prison. But I've got some of those on my list, too, just kind of relate to one of the titles that we have today that we're reviewing, which I think could be defined as a prison movie, but it's a prison movie that takes place outside of prison. Which may sound weird, but when we explain it, I think you'll get it. All right. So, when you think prison films, Wayne, there's one movie I think that comes to mind, and that is The Shawshank Redemption, directed by Frank Darabont, adapted from a Stephen King novella, starring Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman, William Sadler, Clancy Brown. A lot of great ensemble cast in that one. It's rated as like IMDb. I think it's rated as one of the greatest movies of all time, especially from like our generation. And it's one of those movies I feel like people are, if someone hasn't seen Shawshank Redemption, people are kind of dumbfounded and like, how have you gone your whole life without seeing that movie? Because not only was it, it wasn't super popular in the theaters when it came out, but it's had such a long life after theaters that it was hard to miss in the 90s. I mean, anytime I turn on, anytime I turn TBS on in the middle of the week, freaking Shawshank Redemption was playing. So
TBS, AMC, yeah, they, in my opinion, they almost overplay it. It's kind of, I don't want to say lost this luster, if you will, but there's something to overwatching and not overwatching, but overplaying a movie. It's kind of like people kind of get turned off by it.
Yeah. It makes you just not want to watch it as much, I think. Like I feel like I could probably go the rest of my life without seeing Shawshank Redemption and still remember it from beginning to end, unless I get dementia or something. But, other than that, I've seen it enough to where...
You said dementia, and I'm thinking, as a movie buff, wouldn't that be fantastic to watch the greatest hits from the first time all over again?
That's true. That would be pretty spectacular. Every time you watch it, it's brand new. I don't want to make fun of dementia, but yeah, it's that would be. I have thought of that as a movie person of like what it would be like to see these movies for the first time again. Because some of them I've seen so many times, I can't remember the first time.
There's this little film called Ghostbusters. It's gonna be huge.
Maybe I'll just do it to annoy my kids. But yeah, so back to Shawshank.
Yes.
Andy Dufresne is put into jail for a murder that he most likely didn't commit. I don't want to spoil it, I guess, but it's been like almost 30 years. And everybody, the joke in the movie is everybody in prison says they're innocent, but he is innocent, and it's basically this is a prison break movie. As he is trying to escape to a better life. He does try to make, I think, prison good for himself as he, works with the warden, he gets to play the music over the speaker. But it's a touching story about friendship, I guess, too, because between Red and Andy, you get that relationship. Bond. That is kind of like almost like a buddy movie, but it's not, it's not a comedy. Obviously it's a drama. It's very serious. There's just lots of great, like emotional beats in the movie. There's just great scenes overall. The poster covering the hole in the cell.
What about you, fussy britches?
Yes.
Let's just talk about the warden really quick. Between him and Clancy Brown, I forget the actor's name, but those are I think the best duo villain team.
Yeah, a lot of people want Bob Gunton as the warden. He's always listed as like one of the top villains in film history, and it's funny because like he does terrible things, but he's not like a serial killer or like a rapist or anything. But he does do really bad things, and he's got his motives behind it are pretty, sinister. So I think that's
political stuff too.
Exactly, yeah, and personal gain, all that kind of stuff that makes regular people get pissed off, which is why I think he kind of stands the test of time as like this great villain. Even though on the outside, if you look at Shawshank Redemption, it's not even the movie you would really think that there is a villain in, that there is like a character like that.
Right.
But yeah, and then Clancy Brown. And Clancy Brown is great. He really puts his all into his villains or his heroes. So, whatever role he plays, you're always a bit concerned about him. Even if he is a good guy, you're still like, there's something about that guy that I don't trust.
Oh, yeah, and he is doing a fantastic job on the Dexter reboot. Without spoiling anything, creep factor, and oh boy.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm not surprised. Once I saw he was on that show, I was excited because he's always been one of those just character actors that, brings everything up. So when you watch Shawshank and you see that he's in Shawshank too, it really brings it up a level. This movie was quite ignored, I think. It did well critically, but because it didn't make money at the box office, it really didn't get any Oscar love or anything like that. But like I said, we talked last week when we were on the Rocky episode that sometimes over time, movies are going to, fans will tell you what movies get to stay around. And I don't think anyone really anticipated when this movie was released. Didn't kill at the box office. No one thought that this was the type of movie that was going to stay around for a long time. But I know, Wayne, you and I know a lot of friends that really love this movie as much as we do. Mm-hmm. It's become a classic from our generation. The 90s, growing up in the 90s, it really is probably one of the top films of the 90s, one of the top films of the last 30 years. And it continues, I think, to age well. Like you said, it's unfortunate, they do play it a lot, but it is one of those movies that, I know we've talked about these type of movies before, where even if you're just sitting on, you flip on TV, TBS, AMC, and it's on, you just sit there and you watch it, because no matter what part it's at, or if you just watched it like a week ago, you're still just like, oh yeah, like Good Will Hunting is another one that reminds me of, like, I could watch that at any given moment, anytime, doesn't matter. This to me ranks in that kind of area of level of film, and I know we throw a lot of love on that movie. And it's well deserved, and I think this one is well deserved as well.
Yep. One of the funny things was always an ongoing joke with my dad. He was like, when I was a teenager, "Where are you going?" I always just look at him and go, "Do you remember the name of the town? Zehu Watanehu. Is that what it is? I don't know. It's close enough." It's one of those little things that always comes to mind because I don't know, it just is. There's so many quotes.
As a child quoting Shawshank Redemption.
Some people do the Muppets. I do movies about men in prison.
Yeah, hey, you know what? You got to type.
But I mean, so many iconic, memorable moments. Obviously, we talk about the prison break scene, the Brooks Hadlin character, and that heartbreaking. The man spends 60 plus years of his life in prison. He gets released, and he can't function as a normal, semi-free citizen.
They do a good job of all the different levels of being in a prison. You got the guy that just arrived, who doesn't belong there, doesn't want to be there, just going to do everything to get out. Then you got the old timer who's been there forever, and that's his life. And so when he gets his freedom, he has no idea how to handle it, and he gets scared. And he's older than Red, so he doesn't even he has less years left. So he ends up taking his life. Where then Red gets out, and you think they give you that idea, like maybe he's going to do that too, but then he kind of just leaves his mark and goes on his way to meet Andy. Spoiler, but it does a really good job of just giving you the different mindsets of being in a prison, working in a prison, and all that that goes into that. I mean, and to do that in one film and to do it successfully with all those characters. That's the thing, is all those characters were great and fleshed out. Those three that we just talked about.
And just the misdirection that they do, because when they give the impression that Red also kills himself, they give the impression that Andy kills himself in his cell. And then just how the whole story plays out about how he crawled through a river of shit. 500 yards. That's the length of 5 football fields, and came out clean on the other side. Andy Dufresne.
And I think I have to look it up, but I'm going to say that this is probably, if not the first, but one of the earliest Morgan Freeman narrated films. where he's basically telling the story, and that solidified that he will now do that until he dies. And that's basically Morgan Freeman is the guy. And you know how you can't help yourself anytime he's speaking in that movie. It's just magic, if you will.
Yep.
Second here. All right, so I think for the next one, we'll stay within the Stephen King realm. And also, this one stays in prison mostly. It is The Green Mile.
Yes.
And this is another movie I think, I won't say it gets forgotten about, but, you know, Shawshank being considered like an American classic, Green Mile, I don't know, has reached that level. But it's a really fucking good movie. This one's more supernatural. It's got supernatural elements to it. It feels more like a Stephen King story than Shawshank Redemption does, just because of those supernatural elements. So you get Tom Hanks as the guy who runs the death row. Let me bring up the page here so I get all the names and stuff right.
Paul Edgecombe.
Paul, that's right, yes. This is another one with a great ensemble cast. Also directed by Frank Darabont, so his second Stephen King adaptation before he would go on to do The Mist, which would be his third. Tom Hanks, David Morris, Bonnie Hunt, Michael Clark Duncan, James Cromwell, Michael Jeter, Graham Greene, Doug Hutchinson, Sam Rockwell, Barry Pepper, Jeffrey DeMunn, Patricia Clarkson, Harry Dean Stanton. A lot of those are Darabont regular actors. Some of them are not.
Sam Rockwell, this is one of the first movies I can remember him being in.
It's one of his first, like, he'd been acting since, like, he was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Well, let's not all forget that. So he'd been acting for a long time, but this was probably one of his more memorable roles. He still wasn't a lead actor yet. Probably a year or two later, he finally kind of broke out. But I think this put him on the map. And this is what has allowed him to get so many interesting characters. To take a disgusting character like he plays in Green Mile, and I don't. He doesn't make it. He's not likable at all. But I equate it to like Michael Fassbender in 12 Years a Slave. You don't like the character, but you appreciate the amount of work that went in for the actor to put into that character, and the fact that they're so believable in that role. You kind of are astonished by it. At least I was in this role that he plays in The Green Mile, because he's just such a oddball character. You see him in other movies and he plays a lot of these type of roles, but like he could also play the straight man. So it's always interesting to see him play just something like this, something really kind of gross and disgusting of a human being.
Again, you got Doug Hutchinson as Percy, I guess the biggest antagonist in the film. There's another guy that you just love to hate.
Yes, well, you love to hate in real life too. As if we're not going to go into detail, but if you want to look up into Doug Hutchinson and his personal life, you'll see he's not a very good person. But he also made a career out of kind of playing these really oddball, crazy characters. He did a really good turn in Punisher Warzone, which I know a lot of people haven't watched, but he plays a really crazy lunatic in that movie. He did an arc on Law and Order SVU years ago where he played like a serial killer that he did really well at. He just, again, always really well playing those kind of weird characters. And this one is probably his most, not normal, but straight character that he plays, because he's just kind of
Napoleon like complex.
Yeah, he's just like the Warner from Shawshank almost. You know what I mean? Like he's just kind of like a weasel where in some of his other movies he plays like a lunatic. And this one he's just like he's a bratty, selfish weasel that daddy got him his job at the or his uncle or whatever got him the job at the prison. And he feels like everyone is going to be under him at some point. So he just does whatever he wants. And like you said, he's basically like the villain of the movie. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah. No, I was going to apologize for leading us down this path, because we should not talk about anybody else before we talk about Michael Clark Duncan. Yes,
you're correct. And Michael Clark Duncan, Oscar nominated for this role for Best Supporting Actor. The late Michael Clark Duncan died way too early. Had like a heart defect or a heart attack, something along those lines.
Yeah, he's been gone almost 10 years already.
I know,
That's
it's
crazy
crazy.
to think.
Yeah. My wife likes watching this movie, so I've seen this movie quite a bit. So every time we see it, this or like Armageddon or any of his other earlier work, it's sad. It's definitely sad. Just like when you see someone like Philip Seymour Hoffman or Heath Ledger, you kind of reminisce in your mind, like, oh man, like I can't believe they're gone. Yeah, it's such a fantastic performance. I mean, he's going toe to toe with Tom Hanks in this movie. Tom Hanks is a legend already at this point in 1999. Back-to-back Oscars in the early 90s with Philadelphia and Forrest Gump. So you're stepping in this movie, kind of a novice actor, just coming off of Armageddon. A fun movie, but not anything breathtaking acting-wise, right? Everyone was kind of just walking through that film. Having a good time, but walking through that film, and you get to this one, and it's a performance, man. He really sells it. He does such a good job. He makes you feel for the character. He makes you feel for other characters. He's kind of like the electricity in this prison that kind of connects everybody, and you so want him to make it out of this because as the story starts to unravel. And you realize that he is similar to Shawshank. He is an innocent man sitting in prison, but he is a black man in the 1920s, 1930s, somewhere around that time, who they think killed two white girls. So obviously they want him dead. Their father, played by William Sadler, also from Shawshank. So then when the story starts to unravel, you start to realize where Sam Rockwell's character comes into play there. And but before then, you get to witness these miracles, which is a really cool part of this movie. He brings the mouse back to life that Rockwell's, or not Rock, it's Hutchinson's character kills stepson.
Yep.
And and then he fixes Tom Hanks' bladder infection. There's just so many in the Cromwell's wife too, played by Patricia Clarkson. So there's so many things going on in this movie I think that you kind of forget at times that it is a prison movie, but that's where the majority of the film takes place, is on death row.
Yeah, a supernatural sci-fi movie, if you will, as well.
Exactly.
But you brought up the death row. Sorry not to cut you off, but talk about brutal scenes without them actually being bloody and violent. The electrocution scene where Percy deliberately doesn't wet the sponge.
Michael Jeter's character, yep. So in this movie, they show you that you have to put a sponge that's wet on their head so that they don't burn when they get electrocuted, because it's an old school electric chair. And Percy, played by Doug Hutchinson, had a riff with this inmate, and so he doesn't wet the sponge. He pretends to wet the sponge, but he doesn't do it. And it leads to this very emotional, violent scene. And where Hutchinson's character Percy even tries to look away, and they make him look at his mess. That was really powerful too, I think. David Morse, really, he's one of those underappreciated actors, I think, and Brutal. He does such a good job in this movie of being like Tom Hanks' right hand, basically.
Yes.
He was just, you forget, he's from Contact and Proof of Life, and there's just so many other movies that he pops up in. World War Z's in for like 5 minutes, and that scene is very memorable, even though he's in it for 5 minutes. Yep. So to have him in like a lead role, he's in one of my favorites, The Negotiator with Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes.
But to have him in this lead role, I thought was really fantastic for him to be standing right there next to Tom Hanks, and he gives a great performance. And
two other actors,
one that. Sorry, he tries to bring the balance. Go ahead, Wayne.
Two other actors who I just want to bring out. I obviously love Jeffrey DeMunn and pretty much everything he's in, especially when he takes the fire hose to Wild Bill. Piss on me. And then, of course, we have to talk about Harry Dean Stanton's character.
Yes.
The eccentric lunatic. We're praying now, getting right with Jesus. Everybody settle.
Yeah,
do you have any last requests?
That scene, the scene where he has to mimic the electric chair was a really funny moment in an otherwise very dark movie. I think that's what's great about it too, is it kind of has that that snappy Stephen King dialogue that you get. But Derebot knows how to use it where it never gets too cheesy. If you watch some other Stephen King adaptations, they try to take it word for word, and a lot of times it doesn't make sense anymore in the way they're using it, because he writes a lot of like kind of weird slangs and stuff like that aren't even real in real life.
Right. Well, that's where the director needs to, and everybody involved, they need to kind of be able to manipulate the script. There are directors who are notorious for, you will read exactly how it's written. David Chase, creator of The Sopranos, crazy strict when it came to changing dialogue or even like emphasis and delivery. It's like, and that doesn't always work, in times like this. In cases like this, especially if it's a period piece, just because it's written a certain way doesn't mean it's going to deliver properly on screen.
Exactly. Well, like one director I think people would probably be surprised at, Kevin Smith, is very much stick to the script that I wrote. And maybe if I want you to add something later, we'll go back and do it later, but read the script. There was a famous thing where he yelled at Ben Affleck and told him to go write his own screenplay if he wanted to say what he wanted to say during Mallrats. He's like, and he did. And he won an Oscar. So, there is that. But that's always one of my favorite things that Kevin Smith said in one of his specials. But there are a lot of directors that are definitely like, stick to the page, read it how I read it, and then there's a lot that let you do how you want. I imagine on movies like this, it's very much stick to how it's written. Derebot seems like a pretty serious guy. He's worked with a lot of, like Jeffrey DeMunn from Walking Dead. He's worked with him almost on every project. He's also in The Mist, which was his third Stephen King adaptation. But Derebot just has a way about his style, just lends to the Stephen King universe very well, I think. He's very subtle, I think, with a lot of his camera work. Like, I'm just thinking of The Mist and Shawshank. It's just interesting to, I say obviously his camera work. I know there's a cinematographer, but he's obviously their director, so he knows, he's the one telling them to do what they do. That's what I mean. So don't come jumping down my throat, people. He's just, it's weird because he doesn't make a lot of movies. So when he makes a movie, it almost feels like, well, this movie better stand the test of time, because we don't get a lot of Frank Darabont films. Right. And I feel like so far, like Shawshank, The Green Mile, The Mist, I love all those movies. So like they all really have like struck a chord with me, at least, and I think with a lot of people, to kind of stay in our heads for a long time.
I'm going through quotes of this movie right now, and I came across the one where they're about to electrocute John Coffey, and they're having that conversation, and he's like, when I stand on Judgment Day, when I stand before God, what am I supposed to say? This was my job. And then John Coffey gives his epic monologue there. Just going back through, I was shocked that Tom Hanks wasn't even nominated for any awards for his role as Paul Edgecombe.
He was not, no.
Like, I don't know, it's just surprising me. This is one of his, I don't know, when we list Tom Hanks roles, I'll go top 10, maybe top 5, but that's getting crazy. But I just thought I thought for sure he would have been nominated for something, but there's no awards listed at all. So that's just shocking at this point when you think about it.
Outside of Michael Clarke Duncan, I don't think it really got a lot of great recognition. He was, I think, the revelation that a lot of people had out of it, just because, again, coming off of something like Night at the Roxbury and Armageddon, you're not expecting to see a performance like that out of someone in those movies, So I think it was the shock value of seeing him do so well, being a bouncer and a construction worker like 4 years before this, in Chicago. I think it just surprised a lot of people. So that's why you definitely saw him get nominated more so than the movie. I'd have to go back and look and see what was out that year. I think like American Beauty was out that year, so that makes sense. Traffic, Aaron Brockovich, those were all the top the Academy Award movies that year.
It was there's a lot of competition then.
Yeah, it was a good year for sure. But yeah, I mean, Hanks, he does so many movies and so many Oscar-worthy movies. I think sometimes they just leave him off because they want to add somebody else. So, because like I don't think he was nominated for Saving Private Ryan either. But he won 2 Oscars back-to-back in 93 and 94. So I think, you're going to see moments where he doesn't get nominated just out of sheer Like, okay, let's not nominate the same person over and over again, even though they don't give Meryl Streep the same.
I was gonna say, wait a minute now.
Meryl Streep could do a comedy from the Farrelly Brothers, and they're gonna be like, yeah, she's nominated. That's fine. All right.
Frances McDormand's getting that way too now these days.
She is.
Fantastic to see. Not
She's
complaining.
becoming the next Meryl. Yeah. She's nominated every year, and she won 2 recently, which people were surprised that, the one she won last year. But not that she was like surprised that like she's bad, but she was not the front runner by any stretch.
Right.
But she is very good in it, obviously. We're getting a little off topic here. All right, so I'm going to bring up another one, Wayne. I don't know that you've seen this one, but it's one that I really liked. I haven't seen it in a while. It's called Felon. It's from 2008.
Familiar.
It's called directed by Rick Roman-Waugh, starring Stephen Dorff, Harold Perrineau, Marisol Nichols, Ann Archer, Johnny Lewis, Nate Parker, Sam Shepard, and Val Kilmer. It revolves around a man played by Stephen Dorff who is sleeping in his house, and someone breaks in, and he grabs his gun, and he goes out. He chases the guy out of the house. He goes out in his front yard, and he shoots and kills the guy. Now, a lot of people go, oh, self-defense. Well, in this state that he lives in, once they've exited your house, you're no longer under what's the word I'm looking for? You're no longer
duress.
You're under distress. You're no longer in danger. So therefore, they charge him with murder, and he goes to prison. So you have this story of a kind of upstanding blue-collar citizen, thought he did what was right, and then ends up going to prison.
Sounds like another movie where he just should have put the bunny back in the box.
Exactly. Hold on one second.
Obviously, I'm talking about Con Air for those of you that didn't pick up on what I was throwing down there.
Because I wasn't going to talk about today, but that is a prison movie too, so that's a recommendation, Con Air.
Yeah.
It's a prison movie on a plane, everybody. Let's see. Wade Porter is a blue-collar worker living with his girlfriend Laura and their son Michael. I already told you what happens. During the bus ride to prison, Danny Sampson, the leader of the local Aryan Brotherhood, stabs a man and hides the knife with a young Aryan member named Snowman, who is sitting behind Wade. In a moment of panic, Snowman hides the knife under Wade's seat and forces him to deny knowledge of it. As a result, Wade is sent to solitary confinement until the stabbing can be investigated. Lieutenant Jackson interrogates Wade about the stabbing, but he doesn't cooperate with the investigation. They send him to a security housing unit where he is... send Wade to... So the officer sends him to the security housing unit where he is in charge, so he can kind of, keep an eye on him or fuck him up or whatever. So it becomes a movie about a regular guy who has to survive prison long enough. He didn't get a life sentence or anything like that. I think it was like manslaughter. So maybe like 10 years or something like that. So he just has to, it says he's released after 15 months, but I forget what the sentence was. That may have just been like good behavior. But it's a really kind of all over the place on this one. It's a really good movie that I think people didn't realize it even came out in 2008. It was almost a straight-to-video one. But it did, played some like independent theaters and stuff like that. So it got a little bit of a release. And it was just, it's really well done. I've seen it. I think it was on Netflix. It may still be on Netflix. So if you have Netflix and you're like, oh, another Stephen Dorff, Val Kilmer movie, trust me, it's good. It's a really good flick. Both of them get really good performances. And it's just something that, again, I like to draw attention to movies that people maybe haven't seen. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. And let us know what you thought.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up one that I'm very fond of, and may actually be arguably the last great Adam Sandler movie, and that is 2005's The Longest Yard.
Love this movie.
All right, this is quite the ensemble. I'm going to run through real quick. Obviously, you have Adam Sandler in the lead as Paul Wrecking Crew, Burt Reynolds, who in this adaptation is Coach Nate Scarborough. Obviously, Burt Reynolds was in the original Longest Yard back in, I believe, was that the 70s, I think?
Yeah, 74, I think.
Mm-hmm. Chris Rock as Caretaker. Nelly as Megget. Michael Irvin, Terry Crews, Bill Goldberg, Bob Sapp, former Chicago Bears defensive lineman. You got Nick Turturro, Tracy Morgan, and probably one of the most cameo-rific roles of his career, in my opinion.
Yes.
William Fitcher, David Patrick Kelly, Joey Coco Diaz, one of my favorite comedians. Plays Big
really
Tony, the Kansas State guy.
Yeah, right.
And then Dalip Singh, the giant, if you will, pun intended.
Yes.
So just a huge ensemble cast. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Boz, Brian Bosworth. Yep.
That's what's great is they cast well-known people as the prison guards too.
Yeah.
Bill Romanowski is one of the prison guards. You mentioned Boz already, Stone Cold.
Why are we talking about your nipples?
Yeah, Kevin Nash.
Yeah, Kevin Nash, from Magic Mike fame.
The nipple guard.
Yes.
Here it says, guards, William Fichtner, Romanowski, Bosworth, Kevin Nash, Steve Austin, Michael Papajohn, Conrad Good. A lot of them play like characters with their very similar names. Other people, James Cromwell is the warden, Alan Covert, who's Grandma's boy, Rob Schneider, Chris Berman, Jim Rome. Let's see, Dan Patrick, of course, he's become a regular in the Adam Sandler verse.
Isn't Chris Berman the announcer with the prison guard or the prison?
Yeah, Chris Berman with Chief. Remember?
Yes.
There was a great scene where he looks at Chief, kind of like concerned. Chris Berman. It's really fun. So the premise, I mean, it's a similar premise than the first movie.
Yep.
What's it? Paul, right? Paul, played by Adam Sandler, gets arrested for being a jackass, basically driving drunk, wrecking a car.
Courtney Cox is briefly in this movie.
Oh yeah, Courtney Cox plays his girlfriend. So he takes her car for a joyride, drunk, and puts himself and other people's lives in danger. There's the cops all surround him, and they arrest him and they throw the book at him to make an example out of him.
Well, and then even the back and forth between the cop with the big ears.
Yes, yeah.
Don't get short with me, Mr. Frodo.
There's lots of good, Sandler type humor. Yep. He definitely plays the straight character for the most part, and a lot of the other guys coming for the last. What were you going to say, Wayne?
Oh no, I just wanted to make sure we highlighted the character relationship between Nick Turturro and Tracy Morgan.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to cheer my jailhouse boobies off for you. Thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate you, Paul. And then when he's going back and forth with Nick Turturro, which was bringing up earlier, whatever, back freckle.
Yes. Oh my god. Turturro is fantastic.
Yep.
He's not really good at football.
I should have eaten that popcorn. That's Brucey.
Yes. So he goes to prison, and then the warden's like, "Hey, we have a football team, and I want you to put a football team together for the prisoners to go up against the guards, so that my people get practice." William Fichtner's character, who is basically like the lead guard, does not want to do this because he feels like his team is ready and they don't need prisoners. But the warden wants to take advantage of the fact that they have a former MVP quarterback in their prison system. He then, it's kind of like from that point on, it's kind of like Bad News Bears, where he puts together this ragtag team of prisoners, which Wayne already mentioned many of them: Joey Diaz, the big tall dude, Goldberg, Michael Irvin's on the team, Nelly's on the team. Chris Rock is the manager, the equipment manager, essentially. Mm-hmm. You have two. What's cool is David Patrick Kelly plays Unger, and he was in the Warriors, and The Crow. So he's been around for a while. I've always liked him. So when I remember seeing this in theaters, and when I saw that he was Unger, I was like, wow, that's really cool, because it's just one of those moments where you're like, oh, it's a cool character actor that I like to watch, do his thing. Yeah, it's a really fun movie. The original is good too. You seen the original? I'm assuming, Wayne.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they're both, I think, solid films. I think the newest one is a little more enjoyable, like just funnier. Because I
Yes.
don't like the first one was funny-ish, but it wasn't like laugh out loud funny. I don't
Yeah.
think.
And then we can't go without talking about the epic soundtrack to this film.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, overall, like I said at the beginning, this may be the last great Sandler comedy. I mean, I know a lot of people like Grown Ups, and I'm fond of it, but it's
it's
just
not
like
as
when you
good
talk
as
about
everyone says it is.
blockbuster, yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Although, as much as I love Joey Coco Diaz, I can't help but think of Chris Farley in that role instead, and
would have been
then I
perfect.
start getting emotional and sad. So
There's one other one that I want to kind of get into, and then I'll mention a bunch of unless you've got any more after that, Wayne. I'll mention a bunch of recommendations.
we don't even need to talk about it. I just wanted to make sure that we mention 1979's Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood, based on an alleged true story about three men that actually escaped from Alcatraz, but they are never found, and most people assume that they died in the bay, but
Yeah, died in their escape. Yeah,
I know if I was an escaped convict, nobody would be hearing from me ever again. So hey,
right, that would make
at
sense.
least they wouldn't be hearing from Wayne Yerke.
Yes. All right. So the last one I want to kind of go into full detail on is called Brawl and Cell Block 99, directed by S. Craig Zoller, starring Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Carpenter, Don Johnson, Udo Kier, Mark Blucas, and Tom Geary. Tom Geary is the Smalls from Sandler. So this is a movie about a former boxer played by Vince Vaughn, and he ends up. It's a revenge tale, and like he ends up getting arrested and thrown in prison. He like almost beats someone to death, like outside of his house. And in prison, he starts to figure out that there's these people that that have done him wrong, and so he wants to get his revenge. It is a bloody, bloody, bloody fucking movie. I don't know if a lot of people have seen this movie. Craig Zoller makes these kind of like 1970s hybrid modern films where normally it's something you would see in the Grindhouse section back in like the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Bone Tomahawk was also him. So if anyone's seen that movie, that is another bloody, bloody movie. I have yet to watch Dragged Across Concrete with Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson. That's another one of his. It's supposed to be very bloody. But the Brawl and Cell Block 99, just it's so when we talked about Rocky last week, the brutality of it, the brutality of this movie makes like Rocky 3, that final fight scene, look like a children's tale. Like this is just like bone crunching, people's heads getting bashed in. It's insane. And I feel like it's a movie that people probably haven't seen because it was more, in cinemas and on VOD same day type of thing. So people I think avoid those sometimes. Like, Vince Vaughn did a shitty movie. But if you really looked into it, it got great reviews. People really enjoyed it for the most part. It's not a happy movie by any sense, but it's gory as hell. It's a lot of fun. It's brutal. It's violent. Vince Vaughn is really good in this movie. It's just one of those things that every once in a while you get a movie like this, you got to talk about it more. I should have probably talked about it more on this podcast within the last year and a half or so, but I haven't. It's a great fucking movie. So if you get a chance to check it out, it's usually streaming somewhere, I believe. Definitely watch Brawl and Cell Block 99 because it'll shock you to your core, but you'll also be excited that you watched it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Nice.
All right, so other ones I wanted to mention before we get to our next segment here. Shot Caller. Let's see, Escape Plan. The Rock, which is kind of like, it's not really a prison movie, but it takes place in an abandoned prison, Alcatraz.
Yep, I didn't bring that one up just because I know we've talked about it in the past, and I don't want to continue.
I just wanted to mention it as it's definitely
definitely worth mentioning.
Startup, which is with Jack O'Connell and Ben Mendelsohn. That's actually a really good one. Get the Gringo with Mel Gibson. Blood In, Blood Out, while not a prison movie necessarily, has a great long, like, hour scene in a prison with one of the main characters, which I thought was really fantastic. American Me. I Love You, Philip Morris is a movie, a true story starring Jim Carrey and Ewan McGregor, who play two lovers who Jim Carrey's character escaped like 17 different prisons to be with with Ewan McGregor's character. It's really a really fun comedy, but takes place mostly in prison. The Last Castle with Robert Redford and James Gandolfini. I really like that movie a lot.
Yes, we have talked about that one on the show before.
Yes.
Another fantastic, underrated movie.
Exactly. Undisputed, which is Wesley Snipes and Ving Rhames. It's like two boxers end up in the same prison, and they end up coming head to head in the prison together, which I thought was the first one's really good.
Yeah. We would be remiss to not talk about 1987's The Running Man real quick. Although
That's
not
true.
in a prison, but prisoner related, you know.
Well, Running Man and Death Race, both the original and the remake of Death Race, those are like futuristic prison movies, if you will, because they're, like you said, that's not really a prison, but they are prisoners who are made to fight fight to the death, basically. American History X, while also not technically a prison movie, has a great few scenes inside a prison.
Brutal.
Yeah, very brutal, very brutal. Mean Machine is basically the British remake of Longest Yard. It stars Vinnie Jones and Jason Statham. It's about soccer, of course. I think a lot of people might have missed this one. It came out like in 2000, so it wasn't regularly released in the United States until like a year or two after that.
And because it's soccer back then, nobody gave a crap.
Back then.
Obviously, that's changed a little bit. Let's not talk about our Escape Plan 2013.
I mentioned that one, yeah. Yep.
Right?
That's a good one.
You did. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Animal Factory with Willem Dafoe and the kid from American History X, what's his name? Edward Furlong and Danny Trejo. Very good movie. Stir Crazy, funny movie that takes place in a prison for the most part. The Hurricane with Denzel Washington, about a man who wrongfully convicted of a crime, and they spend many, many years in one Bob Dylan song trying to get him out of prison. Dead Man Walking, Sean Penn, Susan Sarandon, really great movie. Crazy film, just very sad, very depressing. Con Air, of course, we mentioned that one already, but I had to mention it again. And then, how could we talk about prison movies without mentioning Ernest Goes to Jail?
Yes.
Classic prison film.
You know what I mean, Vern?
About a man who gets executed and then it has superpowers because it doesn't kill him. Just a classic story. We've all been there.
Couple other ones. Let's Go to Prison, the comedy from 2006. Get Hard.
I forgot about that one. Yeah, kind of like a pre-prison movie.
Yes, Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. And obviously, the Medea franchise, Tyler Perry's Medea Goes to Prison. Just comedic ones that made me chuckle. So if I wanted to mention those real quick.
All right. So next we're going to move on to our reviews
of the week.
First up, we have Unforgivable. It is, like I said earlier, I was kind of hinting at it. It's a prison movie, but not really a prison movie because the whole film, for the most part, takes place outside of a prison. But it's about a woman who is released from prison after 20 years inside, and basically how she has to try to get her life back together. All right. It is directed by Nora Fingscheit. Not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but that's how it's spelled. Starring Sandra Bullock, Viola Davis, Vincent D'Onofrio, John Bernthal, Richard Thomas, Linda Eamon, Aisling Franciosi, and Rob Morgan. Rob Morgan is basically the lone person.
Parole officer. Is he the parole officer?
He's the parole officer, but he's like a long-term Netflix employee because he is literally in every Netflix film. I think he has it in his contract. If they make a movie, he has to have an appearance in it. Marvel fans will know him from the Marvel Netflix shows, as he was the guy they always went to get all the guns all the time. Turk was his name on Daredevil and Punisher.
Yes.
So he's great in this. But Sandra Bullock's the main character. She plays... Oh, not the plot, because I know the plot.
Ruth Slater.
Yeah, Ruth Slater. Who,
this is our first time seeing Sandy B since Bird Box, right? In 2018?
I think so. She hasn't done a whole lot since then. I don't know if she just had a lot of movies that were kind of like supposed to be done around the pandemic, and that kind of put everything on hold. But yeah, so this one, it starts out with her getting out of prison. She gets flashes of what happened, what sent her there. We come to find out that she's a cop killer, and that's why she was in jail for 20 years. She gets out for good behavior. It wasn't like I don't know if they charged her. I doubt it was first degree. They never really tell us what the charge was, but I doubt it was first degree murder for her to get out in 20 years. It was either second degree or manslaughter would be my guess, because it was a situation where they were trying to take her house away, and she was, trying to stay with her sister and worried that they would take her away from her. And so, the guy ends up, as the story goes on, you find out what happened and what really happened. I'm not going to spoil that for you, because I want people to kind of experience it.
Very, very interesting little switcheroo, though, that I was not expecting.
It has a kind of a surprise twist to it that you don't see coming, because you're so focused on the characters that you really don't expect there to be anything else kind of thrown at you. But it does a good job of hiding it. So she gets out, she gets a job she has a job lined up, but then they find out she's a cop killer. She loses that job, ends up working at the fish factory, or the fish place, whatever, where they cut fish up with John Bernthal. That's where she meets him. He takes a liking to her.
This takes place in Seattle, known for its fish market. So that kind of plays together and whatnot.
And Rob Morgan, her parole officer, he has a deal with the guy that runs it, that he takes his parolees in and gives them a job, right? Regardless of what they've done. And she also then finds work at a church that's being a shelter that's being put up for the homeless. Right. And she kind of just volunteers herself, but they do end up paying her, I think, minimum wage. Rebecca and I joked that, like, basically this guy was just like handed this job off to her. We never saw the guy that gave her the job ever again. It was literally just her.
And she gets out of that halfway house, or whatever the correct terminology is, and she's staying at the location, it looks like. And let's talk about that for a second. Just you get out of prison and you have to live in this halfway house, which is basically just prison without the bars, because you're still in a dirty, dank room with bunks with 3 other addicts or recovering criminals or whatnot. And just gosh. Yeah,
it's not a they do a good job of showing that, because we don't spend a lot of time in prison, but they show that basically life outside of prison is no picnic either. Kind of like how we talked about with Shawshank. Getting back to a normal life is not something that they're really going to do. Like Rob Morgan's character, I liked his character a lot, because he kind of starts off a bit rough on her. But then when he starts to see that she's starting to get what he's been trying to teach her, he lightens up a little bit. And he's like, you have to understand that it's different now. Your life is different, and it's not ever going to be the same again. I do want to point out, though, she makes a great point where she says people on the outside are just like people on the inside. And she's not wrong, especially like in the political climate we're in now, the way people are, the way people get off into groups, the way white supremacy is coming back, very big in prison, white supremacy. So, it's one of those things that I shouldn't say coming back, just coming out into the open again.
Right.
It's always been there. It is kind of a statement on society and prison at the same time, I think. She meets Vincent D'Onofrio's character and his wife, Viola Davis, who they're both lawyers. D'Onofrio's character, though, is more of a pro bono, will save the world type of lawyer. And so he feels sorry for her. So he tries to help her reconnect with her sister, who was with her when the incident occurred. And the sister doesn't really remember her. She just has flashes of this woman kind of holding her close and hugging her. So it's really it's pretty emotional, I would say.
I think the sister does remember, though, but without going into detail, that's why she has the episode she has. They just don't reveal that. So,
well, and she's really repressing it. Well,
yes,
whether it's
absolutely.
because you're right, because it's there. It's just being very repressed in her
It's
mind.
very hard to talk about new releases without
It
revealing the
is.
whole
It
kit and
is. That's why
caboodle.
every once in a while we'll have to do a spoiler heavy one. But this one, I'm trying
Yes.
to not give anything away. I'll just say this: I thought it was a really well done film. It's not getting a lot of love from critics, but the audience numbers on I think Rotten Tomatoes are very high, like 85% or something like that.
That's around where I am right now. When we give our scores and whatnot,
Yeah.
I'm probably
No,
around that category.
yeah, I think it's hard to call it entertaining, but it is. I mean, it's an interesting movie to watch. The drama is really good. Sandra Bullock is very good in it. Viola
Yes.
Davis is really good. Another very minor role for her. She's only in it a little bit at the beginning, but she does have a great scene with Sandra at the
Yes.
end of the movie before she starts helping her. And it's really like it reminded me of Doubt, which was a movie that Viola Davis was in for about 3.5 minutes and received an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. So
Yep.
I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in this movie because it probably won't because it's not as highly rated as that one or highly touted either. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, oh yeah, we're going to give her a supporting nom for this because just in that little it's probably a paragraph written on page. Just that little segment of that scene was really she did a really fantastic job.
Right. Yeah, it troubles me a little bit that this isn't better received because everybody in this is really good and really believable. I mean, obviously, you
Yeah.
got performance from D'Onofrio and Viola Davis. I really like John Bernthal in this one. Like, just a really believable, there's some stuff with his character that
Yep.
not going to talk about just because it might mess with the story a little bit, but he does a really good job. John Boy, Richard Thomas, another, a really fantastic job by him and just being the concerned parent, if you will. And we'll just leave that at
And
that.
people call him John Boy because he was on that one show that one
Little
time.
House of the Prairie. No,
Yeah.
no, wait. Something,
That's what,
no, not that one, but he's in one of those
those type
old
of shows.
timey, yeah. And then, the two brothers.
I know him as Older Bill from Stephen King's It miniseries. So that's when
Yes,
I
of course.
first saw. To me, and he almost looks exactly the same as he did 30 years ago. So I was like, geez, he just a little grayer.
Yep.
He's aging well. It was, for me, as a movie buff, it was fun to see him in this movie because you never see him in a movie with Sandra Bullock. It's like if you see him, it's a TV movie or it's a guest spot in a TV show or something. So the fact that he got cast in this, I thought was cool, at least to me.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, everybody, you're right. He did a good job. And Rob Morgan, we talked about already. John Bernthal, Vincent D'Onofrio is always really good. I will say, this movie loses some points for me for some of the dialogue. Like there was the scene with D'Onofrio and Sandra Bullock in the car when he's dropping her off at the bus station. Some of that writing was a bit clunky, but I felt like D'Onofrio did his best to kind of work around it,
Right.
and did a good job with it. It was just I was like, it seemed a bit off for me, but it didn't stop me from liking the movie and enjoying the movie. My wife really liked it a lot. She even, as we were putting on Netflix either yesterday or today, it popped up on this. She's like, that was a good movie. I'm like, yeah, it was a really good drama. That's something we like here. We like a lot of good dramas and thought it did a really good job. So Wayne, what would you rate it then?
I'm in the 8s. I think it was that solid of a movie for me.
Okay, so 8 out of 10.
Yep.
I'm gonna say 7 out of 10. Where I did like it. It didn't. Some movies hit me emotionally a lot more. This one, for some reason, it didn't just hit me as emotionally as I would have liked it to. But I did enjoy it, and I thought the performances were really good. And I think people should definitely go watch it. Sandra Bullock is just one of those actresses. I never thought much of her coming up in the 90s because she did a lot of shitty movies. But she's really good. And I think if you want to see another solid performance from her, this definitely fits the bill. Check it out on Netflix right now. All right, so the next one we're going to get to, I think this is going to – I don't know what you thought of it, Wayne, but I think it's going to be one that polarizes people because it's already being talked about as one of the best movies of the year. It's being nominated for a bunch of awards, the AFI awards and whatever other awards have happened so far. It's The Power of the Dog. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Jesse Plemons, Kirsten Dunst, and Kodi Smit-McPhee. and it is a Western that takes place in like the 1920s, 1930s. So it's one of those weird Westerns that has cars in it. That always throws me off when you're watching a Western and then someone's driving a car. Like,
Right.
this doesn't seem right. But that's because where it takes place, they're in the South, and
1925.
1925. So like they're still like cowboys and stuff, but they're not. People aren't like being shot in the street as much as they were back in in the 1800s and early 1900s. It starts. So you get Jesse Plemons, Benedict Cumberbatch. They run this ranch, and Kirsten Dunst has this like restaurant or food place. It's not really a restaurant back in 1925, but where people go to eat. It's not your typical restaurant, I guess I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they meet. Jesse Plemons' character meets her and falls in love. His brother is very much a very prickly person. He is not very nice. He calls his brother Fatso the whole time.
Yep.
They meet Kodi Smit-McPhee, who is the one that he's the son of Kirsten Dunst, and he makes the flowers like for the table and stuff. So they end up like calling him Nancy and making gay jokes towards him. But there's something that is kind of subtly underneath the surface of this movie, and it's the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch's character Phil is actually a homosexual, which we don't. But because it like for the press of the movie and stuff, they talked about it, so it's something that's been out there. So I'm not spoiling anything. But if you don't know anything about the movie going into it, it's definitely under the surface. They're not blatant with it, but he talks about this character that he worked with, that he was really fond of.
Bronco,
yeah, Bronco, was it Bronco Billy or Bronco Henry? Bronco Henry, and people always ask him stories about it because Bronco Henry was like this kind of like mythical figure that people knew about, but Phil got to actually work with him. Well, there's a lot more there to that story.
Yes.
It's told in chapters, so it breaks.
You really need to pay attention to the little subtle, minute details, even at the end, to understand what exactly is happening.
You do, and it's okay if you have to research it a little bit. I looked up some more defining things about it just to make sure I knew what was actually going on, because sometimes you'll be into a movie and you're just like, wait a minute, I'm not sure. I think that's what was going on and that's what they were saying, but I'm not quite sure. I heard that the book, because it is based off of a novel, is more to the point, where the movie she wanted Jane Campion wanted to leave the movie more open, like kind of like it's there, but you have to look, like you said, when you got to pay attention, you got to look for it, otherwise you may miss it. We're not going to say what it is because it's a really great like kind of turn towards the end of the movie. But again, this is a very quiet, very subtle film overall, and it requires patience. So I knew for a fact, like I watched this by myself. I started watching it with Rebecca, but she was like on her phone or something, and I think she fell asleep. So I knew that this was a movie that she probably maybe wouldn't enjoy, so I wanted just to watch it by myself.
Yeah.
There are definitely, like I said, I think there'll be people that are disappointed with it just because of who's in it, and it's not entertaining. It's not, and I don't mean that in a bad way towards the movie. It's not, there aren't explosions, there aren't gunfights, there aren't any of that in here. It's a character study of just people who, a lot of tension in this movie. There's so much tension in this film.
It makes you incredibly uncomfortable just watching it and the emotions that people are going through. I mean, there's one point where my man P. Lemons disappears for a good chunk of the movie. It's like, wait a second, I thought this was his story. Well, obviously not. Obviously it focuses on the Phil character and that stuff, but
it's
not something that you're going to watch to enjoy. It's something that, it's a story that I don't even know exactly the correct wording for it. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this, but it's just one of these things where it's enjoyable, but not for the...
It's not a movie that's enjoyable for entertainment value.
Thank you.
You're going to get a lot out of it, I think, as a person emotionally, There's just a lot to it. These characters have so much depth to them. It's so well written, well acted. You could tell that they spent some time, and they had time. I listened to both Plemons and Cumberbatch in separate interviews. Were on Mark Maron's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They got shut down with like 3 weeks left to film in New Zealand, so they stayed there for like 5 months in order so they could go back to shooting it. So if you think about it like that, like they got to live with these characters while not filming for so long, and I'm sure it stayed in their headspace for that time. And some of these characters are tough. Phil is a tough character, I think, to kind of wrap your head around. And then this isn't really a spoiler, but there are moments where they try to humanize him and they try to make you feel for him. But is what the person he's been, does he deserve redemption? Does he deserve karma? There are these questions, and Jane Campion leaves you with that kind of towards the end of the movie, like, what do you think that these people deserve? And is there really a good person or a bad person? I would argue that between the two people that have the big conflict at the end of the movie, that neither one of them are really a good person. I would say truly the only good people were Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons, where Plemons' character, the brother, is trying to get along with his brother, trying to get him to understand that times have changed, and it's okay for you to be you, but you don't have to be such a prick all the time. And he's so mean to Rose, played by Kirsten Dunst, and it kind of drives her to be an alcoholic. Like, there's so many things that he does in this movie that it's hard to even like root for him. But then there are moments where you get to, they peel the layers back, if you will, and you get to kind of see what kind of person he really is.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I kept thinking how crazy it would be if they did a sequel to show what Peter Gordon turns into. And again, being vague, because they could take this in some really dark places if they want to.
They could. And that's what I was listening to Mark Maron. He talked about that. Like, just because certain things happen, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, neither one of those characters are really a good guy. You're just kind of left with like, oh, it's really one of those reveals where you're like, oh fuck, like, now I don't know how to feel anymore. Like, I don't, because it for one moment it's one thing, and the next moment it's a complete other thing. And this is the best we could talk about it without giving away anything. But I would say, out of the movies that we've seen so far, Wayne, out of the movies that I've seen so far, just speaking for myself, it is one of the best movies of the year. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of the other stuff that's being nominated at this moment because a lot of it isn't really come out yet. But I have a hard time not seeing Cumberbatch and even Plemons nominated for supporting, and definitely Kirsten Dunst too. I think she'll be nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this. Maybe even Kodi Smit-McPhee. It's a very interesting character because you don't know much about him early on in the movie. He kind of disappears for a little bit, and then when he comes back, man, it's just, and then you're just like, oh God, I don't know if I ever will trust anybody ever again. Like, it's just, it's such a subtle roller coaster, if that makes sense, where it's not, because it's, you know what I mean? Because it's not like super exciting the whole 2 hours, but you're like, every chapter you're kind of put on a different tension, it's a different level. So it was really interesting to watch. Jane Campion doesn't make a lot of movies. So for me personally, I would say it was a 9 out of 10. That's very high. But that's just what I think. I think it really did a good job of just getting under your skin for the 2 hours and kind of making you feel the same tension. The score, we should talk about the score too. The score was fantastic. I think that really helps keep the tension.
Yeah, it's very unsettling. I was going to go 8.5, but because my man Plemons is in it, who I have been told multiple occasions that I resemble, I will bump it up to a 9 as well.
I will say this, Wayne, don't be offended by this. When I put it on, Rebecca goes, that guy looks like Wayne.
So I'm on his Plemons IMDb page, and he's only 31 years old. He
He's
looks
young.
like he's close to 50. I'm like,
well,
my
because
man, come on.
he put on weight for one of the roles within the last like 3 years, and I think he just hasn't gotten it off yet. I don't know if he just doesn't want to, or if he's
all good.
If he's happy, he's happy, right?
Indeed. And of course, anytime we talk about Jesse Plemons, gotta remind everybody that he was in Varsity Blues as the younger brother to Paul Walker.
Yes,
never forget hashtag.
He does actually talk about that on the Mark Maron podcast. So the composer Johnny Greenwood did a fantastic job. One of the guys from Radiohead. Also did Licorice Pizza, which is one, and Spencer, which are two of the other top movies of this year. So he's been busy. But he also did Phantom Thread for Paul Thomas Anderson. You Were Never Really Here. Inherent Vice for Paul Thomas Anderson. He's worked with Paul Thomas Anderson a lot. But yeah, he's one of the. I don't know if he's not the lead guy from Radiohead, right? He's one of the guitarists or whatever. The people are going to be yelling at me because I don't know who the lead guy of Radiohead is. But
what's a Radiohead?
It's such a tense score, and it really helps the movie, give you that feeling that you're just of anxiousness. And I thought it was just one of those things that just popped up as I was watching, and every time it would get very tense in the music. It was interesting, and I really enjoyed the score of this film. So that's that. That's our reviews of the week. We appreciate. I want to cut that out because I don't know what we appreciate because we're not at the end of the fucking show yet. So
good night, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Yes. I did watch 2 other movies this week. One called Encounter with Riz Ahmed. It's okay. It's like it pretends to be a science fiction film, but it's really not. It's got Riz Ahmed, Octavia Spencer. Riz Ahmed gives a nice performance. It reminds me, Wayne, do you remember Perfect World with Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood from the 90s? It's the one where Kevin Costner gets out of jail and he befriends this child.
Yes. I love that.
It reminded me a lot of that, except in this movie, the children are actually his children. But it was similar to that where he, is being, kidnaps his kids and then he's led on this, or he leads the police on this chase, basically. It's okay. I would say like a 6 out of 10. It wasn't great, but it was entertaining. I will say this though, and it was funny because when the Sandra Bullock movie, The Unforgivable, ended, this isn't a spoiler. It ends with someone hugging somebody. My wife was like, Rebecca was like, "What? That's how it's going to end?" She's like, "I want to know more. What happened to these people?" This other movie, Encounter, also ends on a hug, and I watched them on the same day. I was like, "Well, how did I watch 2 movies that end on hugs?" That's just weird in itself.
Did they freeze frame the hug to make it?
They did not freeze frame the hug. Otherwise, that would have been a very anti-hug.
Missed opportunities.
They slowly dissolve out. The other one I watched is a kind of schlocky 80s movie called The Brain, where a giant alien and a talk show, or like a Dr. Philish talk show host guy are using the TV to brainwash people. And they, yes.
Not too far off.
They take these kids that, that are bad kids and say that they need to look after them like in a mental, in a psych ward type place. And they end up trying to basically devour them in a way. I really like this movie. I didn't think I was going to because it was kind of one of our schlocky ones that we were going to review. But it's not. I didn't think it was as bad as some people say it is. I thought it was actually it was good. There was lots of good tension. The acting's not the greatest, but it's a 1980s Canadian film, so take that for what it is. It does have one of the actors from Reanimator in it, David Gale. So he was the TV show host / kind of an alien himself. The giant alien is really cool. Like the creature effects are pretty badass for a low budget Canadian film from the 1980s. If you have Amazon Prime, it's available there now. And so is Encounter with Riz Ahmed, both on Amazon Prime. Encounter is an Amazon Prime original where the brain is just there at the moment. Definitely check it out. We've been watching more Squid Game. That's a really good show. Yellowstone.
I have to get on Yellowstone. I have not heard much about it, honestly, but other than the fact that everybody seems to love it. But I don't know much in regards to it, other than
it's
being
really
like
good,
a Western.
It's real. Everyone's really good in it. Costner's fantastic. It's really good. Mayor of Kingstown with Jeremy Renner. Hawkeye with Jeremy Renner. Been watching those. Been liking those a lot. So yeah, that's what I've been watching this week. Wayne, anything else that you were able to get to this week?
Because it's the Christmas season, we watched Home Alone 1 and Home Alone 2. The only Home Alones. I have thrown on the... I always like to annoy my wife, Miranda, by playing the end of It's a Wonderful Life because she is not a fan of that movie. So I've watched that at least once. Obviously, I am engrossed in the Dexter New Blood, which is still fantastic. I can't wait to watch today's episode because they release on Sundays. So that's about it. Yeah, good stuff though.
All right. I also watched Surviving Christmas. Do you remember that one with Ben Affleck and James Gandolfini from the early 2000s?
I do remember that one. Yes.
It's bad, people, but I still like it. Like, I don't know what Affleck was doing in that movie because he plays him like he's a psychotic person. like he doesn't know how to be like detached from like real people like in reality, so he just played him as a lunatic. But it's a cheesy, funny movie. I liked it. It's on Paramount Plus, I believe, right now. I also watched Love the Coopers, which I had not seen, which is like more of a Christmas drama in the way of like something like Family Stone, but then they try to force in like the cheesy comedy, which it just doesn't really work. Right. But overall, it was fine. It's John Goodman and Diane Keaton. Who else is in it? Olivia Wilde is in it, and I'm trying to think. There's a couple other actors that are. Marissa Tomei as well, and the son is Ed Helms. So it was a solid flick for the holidays. We've talked about this last year. I like a lot of cheesy holiday movies. I don't know why. I just do, and even the really bad ones.
But I'm going to get into a lot more of the Christmas movies. Obviously, one of the ones we reviewed early in the 2020, Last Christmas, I'm definitely going to revisit.
Yep.
Obviously, I will revisit Bad Santa, at least the first one.
Yes.
We have a whole bunch. I don't know. I don't need to go into the whole Christmas list, but we got to get Scrooged in there. Got to get Muppet Christmas Carol. There was a lot of them, good ones that we reviewed last year at this time.
Yeah, Happiest Season is one I'm gonna
yes
watch again for sure.
The Christmas Chronicles, Jingle Jangle, and then all the classics. Yeah. You'll hear a lot more of these in the next couple weeks coming because I am going into Christmas mode hardcore.
That reminds me. I also watched the movie Hardcore this week, which is basically the movie that inspired Nick Cage's 8mm. Nice. So George C. Scott plays a dad who's trying to find his daughter who he sees in a porno and is not happy. He doesn't see it because he wants to. Someone makes him watch it because he's like, I'm looking for my daughter. And he's like, I found her. Peter Boyle is the private detective in this one, kind of playing the Nick Cage role. I did like 8mm better, but I did like Hardcore. It's very gritty, underground type film. So if you haven't seen that, you could rent it or buy it in most places.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get The Night Before in there. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Seth Rogen, and Hawk.
I love that one. It's a good one.
Anthony Mackie.
Anthony Mackie.
And of course, the greatest Christmas movie of all time, Die Hard. You have to watch that.
I thought you were going to say Ernest Saves Christmas.
That's like number 3 on the list. But definitely the greatest Christmas movie of all time. As my wife likes to disagree with me, and she's sitting here in the room with me. Die Hard. Greatest Christmas movie of all time.
Yeah, obviously we'll watch Die Hard. Scrooged is my personal favorite, but I get Die Hard is one of the greatest action movies ever made. So I completely
number 2 on the list for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be getting into. Is there anything else that I will be watching? Oh, Family Stone. I like watching the Family Stone every holiday season. It's a dysfunctional family drama. That's what I like. And so it kind of fits in nicely when they do ones that are holiday themed. So it makes me, I do watch them year round. Love Actually, obviously we putting that one on too.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into the news and notes here. Scarlett Johansson leaves Apple Plus film Ghosted. Ana de Armas steps in to star alongside Chris Evans. Charlie Cox is officially confirmed by Kevin Feige as still Daredevil in the MCU. Patty Jenkins leaves the director's chair for Gal Gadot's Cleopatra to work on Wonder Woman 3 and Rogue Squadron. She will stay on as producer. Carrie Scogland from Falcon and the Winter Soldier will make her feature film directorial debut in her place. Shang-Chi 2 is in the works, and director Destin Daniel Cretton will return and also direct and create an unknown Marvel series for Disney+. Nick Offerman joins the cast of HBO video game adaptation The Last of Us. Colin Farrell officially reprising Penguin role for HBO Max series. Tom Holland to play Fred Astaire in an upcoming biopic. Dave Bautista joins new M. Night Shyamalan film Knock at the Cabin. Jennifer Lawrence to play Elizabeth Holmes in Adam McKay's biopic about the disgraced Theranos CEO. It will be produced by Apple Films. Henry Goulding, starring in Dean Kuntz's adapted TV series Nameless. Will Ferrell, Jamie Foxx, and Will Forte will star in Strays, an animated live-action hybrid geared towards adults. Tandy Newton in talks to join Magic Mike 3. Sam Raimi will produce the American version You're Dead, Helene, which is based on a short film. Jason Eisner, director of Hobo with a Shotgun and creator of Dark Side of the Ring, just wrapped Kids vs. Aliens, which may be a spinoff of his VHS 2 segment. Amanda Stenberg in talks to star in Star Wars series The Acolyte. Mark Hamill, Frank Langella, and Carla Gugino join Mike Flanagan's The Fall of the House of Usher over at Netflix. Florence Pugh and Rami Malek latest to join Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer biopic. Texas Chainsaw Massacre getting a video game from Gun Media. It's the same company that made Friday the 13th, the video game. Will be out sometime next year. Wonder Woman officially getting her first solo video game. New Phantom of the Opera adaptation lands at Universal. Tom Hanks and Billy Bob Thornton to appear on Yellowstone 1883, which is the prequel to the current Yellowstone series. Jason Momoa to star in The Last Manhunt, a western about the true story of Willie Boy. Release is coming up. MacGruber series debuts on Peacock December 16th. Hotel Transylvania 4 finally debuting on Amazon Prime on January 14th. Kristen Bell will star in The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window Netflix series, which debuts January 28th. Hell of a title on that one. Deaths this week. Bob Dole, former presidential nominee for the Republican Party, dead at 98. Martha De Laurentiis, famous Hollywood producer and wife to Dino De Laurentiis, who passed away 11 years ago. She was 67 and died from cancer. Demaryius Thomas, the former Bronco and Houston Texan. Apparently it was some medical issue, maybe a seizure that he passed away from, only 33 years old. Very sad. He was very young.
Shocking
Michael
to hear
Nesmith. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
It was shocking to hear this week.
Michael Nesmith, The Monkees, dead at 78. And then Anne Rice just passed away today, the author of Interview with the Vampire, dead at 80. All right, everybody. So that is our show for this week. We appreciate you guys listening or watching or whatever. It's been a lot of fun making these every week, 74 episodes. We're getting close to 100. So that'll be pretty crazy when we hit that mark finally. Yeah. So that's it for Now Showing with Mike and Wayne this week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day, week, month, year. I'll be there for you. I just had to bust into it.
I'm leaving all of that in.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Hasta la vista, baby.
It's never goodbye.